Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Mallard Grodner Attorneys providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Alumni Association connecting IU's network of alumni and sharing the Indiana spirit through scholarships, advocacy, and volunteerism. Alumni.iu.edu. IU Center for Rural Engagement extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. Rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana Newsdesk. Words such as transformational and once in a lifetime are being used to describe the state's new budget, and in particular, the money it allocates for education. Ahead, a look at the state's spending priorities, plus lawmakers adjourn the 2021 session this week. Our State House reporter joins us for a full recap. Indiana University's graduation ceremonies are just a couple weeks away. Ahead, why it's so important to read the fine print before booking a hotel for friends or family.
If someone is only taking, cash or check or something like that, boy, that's going to be difficult to get your money back.
And some trees with the showiest springtime blooms are one of the greatest threats to native plant species. We'll tell you why local and state officials are asking people not to plant them. Those stories, plus the latest news headlines from across the state, right now on Indiana Newsdesk. Welcome to Indiana Newsdesk. I'm Joe Wren. More than 1.6 million Hoosiers have now been fully vaccinated against COVID-19. That's a quarter of the state's population. But new positive cases of the coronavirus have crept back up to an average of more than 1,000 a day in the state. Now, earlier this month, the governor lifted the state's mask mandate and other COVID restrictions. Local communities, however, are still allowed to impose the mandate. The Marion, Monroe, and St. Joseph counties have all expanded mask orders, but other populous counties like Allen, Vanderburgh, and Vigo counties have not. Monroe County is back in the yellow advisory category after weekly cases per 100,000 residents rose above 120. 27% of the county's population over age 16 has been fully vaccinated. Bloomington's mayor says that's one of several numbers local officials are looking at to determine when it's safe to loosen restrictions.
One is how many people are fully vaccinated. And we really want to see that number get up to 3/4 or more. And the other main number, I guess it's a couple different set of numbers, are what do we see in terms of the positivity rate, the daily caseloads, and the hospitalizations.
So who has the local authority to enforce or overturn emergency health orders will change under legislation agreed upon this week. We're joined by Indiana Public Broadcasting State House reporter Brandon Smith to talk about this and other issues as the state wrapped up its 2021 session. Hello, Brandon. So the bill would allow elected officials, not county health officials, to have the final say on health emergency orders. Why the change?
Well, Republican lawmakers who were the ones spearheading this legislation said they wanted that authority at the local level to rest with an elected official, the way that the governor takes input from the state health department and FSSA, but ultimately as an elected official makes the final calls. Now, what opponents of this legislation say is that you're actually tying the hands of local health officials who are best positioned to make those calls about health cases. We'll see if the governor signs it into law, but that bill was passed here in the final week of session, which wrapped up Thursday with a surprisingly near unanimous approval of a new state budget.
Republicans called the 2021 legislative session transformational. Democrats were not quite so effusive with their praise, but everyone agrees it was a session no one will likely forget, impacted in every way by the COVID-19 pandemic. House Speaker Todd Houston lamented the lack of connection among lawmakers this year, driven by the pandemic, but he says COVID-19 also brought positive change.
Really forced communication among members on their bills to be far better. And I think the challenge for Senator Bray and I moving forward is how do you sustain that?
The session ended with the passage of a new $37 billion budget. It gives a big boost to K-12 spending and includes $5 billion in one-time spending focused on paying down debt and investing in infrastructure projects and economic recovery. Still, Senate Minority Leader Greg Taylor says some priorities were misaligned. He cites a decision not to mirror the federal government and allow Hoosiers to deduct unemployment benefits from their 2020 taxes.
But at the same time, the PPP loans that the business community sought, and they're going to be forgiven, we don't tax this income in Indiana. I think that's a stark contrast.
COVID-19 is also changing the way the session ended. Technically, the session will keep going until this fall, when lawmakers return for redistricting.
And Brandon, education spending makes up about half of the state's total budget. Where's that money going?
Yeah, the billions of dollars, literal billions of dollars that bolstered the state budget in the final couple of weeks of session, a lot of that's going to education in an unprecedented increase, $1 billion new dollars for K-12 education. Now, what Democrats are both happy and upset about is, for one, they're a little upset that there's a significant expansion of the state's private school voucher program, but a lot of that K-12 money is going to traditional public schools, and for the first time, as President Pro Tem Roderick Bray points out, there is specific language in the budget that directs schools to dedicate at least 45% of their per-pupil funding to teacher salaries.
We're hopeful that that helps those dollars get into the classroom and get into the teachers' pockets where we really truly want them to be.
And Brandon, lawmakers passed a ban on COVID-19 vaccine passports in the waning hours of the session. What's behind that bill?
Well, obviously, vaccine passports have been in the news, and so Republicans have started to talk about that at the State House the last few weeks. What the final language says is that the state and local governments cannot issue or require vaccine passports for COVID-19, which would show proof of immunization status. Unlike earlier provisions of the bill, it has nothing to do with private businesses or the private sector, but Democrats like Representative Ed Delaney say it's solving a problem that doesn't exist.
I'm in the United States of America. This year's 2021. There's no such thing as an immunization passport. There is such a thing as a concern about health.
Brandon, we have just a few seconds. What are some of your takeaways during a session during a global pandemic?
Yeah, everything was different. The way they met, the way the public was able to participate, the process itself, everything about this session changed because of COVID-19. It'll be interesting to see what stays changed forever.
All right, Brandon, thank you so much for all of your reporting during the session. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe.
Well, the Bloomington City Council is debating whether to allow multiplex housing in residential areas as part of zoning changes to the Unified Development Ordinance. For our City Limits coverage, Ethan Burks walked the streets of some of Bloomington's neighborhoods to see what impact these changes could have.
Just south of IU's campus is the Elm Heights neighborhood. It's one of Bloomington's dozen or so residential areas, commonly referred to as the core neighborhoods. It's also the place local resident Jim Rosenbarger has called home for more than 30 years.
In a lot of ways, the neighborhoods are smarter than we are because they have this built-up, embedded pattern.
Rosenbarger is also a local architect who knows Bloomington's housing market. He strongly opposes the proposed changes to the UDO.
When you institute something that's in policy for a neighborhood that is already sliding toward all rental, home buyers, I think, will just be turned off.
One of the most controversial measures being considered is legalizing duplexes in most of the core neighborhoods. Rosenbarger and others against the zoning changes don't want the neighborhoods exposed to more rental turnover or to attract outside investors.
Rental house, Bloomington, Indiana, great markets, known nationally. I mean, that's the kind of thing, student markets, the rents are high. Comes in, says, I'm going to do duplexes, I want 30 houses.
This has been a constant concern throughout the UDO proposal process. People on both sides of the issue agree that Bloomington needs more housing, and much of it should be affordable, but they disagree on where that housing should go.
Our core is the old neighborhoods that really exemplify how our city grew, how we became a city, and so they're very precious.
Sorby believes the neighborhood should be protected, and this change will only make it easier to increase rentals. She says plexes could be the correct approach for creating a more affordable housing market, but placing them in existing residential areas is a problem.
They are not intended to be scattered everywhere. They're intended to be a bridge between single family and a higher, taller building.
Both Sorby and Rosenbarger say a village center development, like the one surrounding the East Hillside Drive and Henderson Street intersection, is a better model.
It makes sense. People who want to live in a higher density area, they're happy to do it for the trade-off of having a coffee shop next door.
Although the city does favor densifying areas with village centers in its comprehensive plan, the potential UDO changes extend well beyond that. In 2019, the same proposal to approve plexes in the core neighborhoods was rejected after strong community opposition.
It's been said elections have consequences, and that the city council makeup has changed.
Since that rejection, the city council underwent an election cycle. The voting makeup has changed as it lost members who were against plexes and gained new ones who favor it. But there are also some citizens who agree.
If the number of people who want to live in a neighborhood increases by a certain amount, allowable density should increase by that amount.
These new changes were also supported by the majority of the Plan Commission during deliberations this spring.
The UDO is living and breathing, and we can change this. But if we're going to do it, let's give it our all and see if it works.
But not everyone is convinced that the city can walk this back if it doesn't work.
The way I understand it, from talking to a lawyer, the way it works is if once an investor starts to invest in that direction, they get to keep going. So it seems a little fuzzy about being able to say you can shut it off.
The decision has not been made. The City Council still has time to make last-minute adjustments to the zoning proposal before it will cast its final vote on the measure in the coming weeks. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Ethan Burks.
Now, over the course of many public city meetings this spring, it's clear the City Council is divided over adding plexes in the neighborhoods. Amendments protecting certain areas could be coming as the UDO process continues. Coming up next on Indiana Newsdesk. The Bradford Pear tree has been popular with city planners and landscapers for the past half-century, but officials now are encouraging people not to plant the invasive species. And with Indiana University graduation approaching, we take a look at what you need to know before booking a hotel. These stories and more right here on Indiana Newsdesk.
Stay close to Indiana Newsdesk as we trace education issues all the way from the Capitol to your child's classroom. So many topics that arise each year in the State House affect what happens every day in the schoolhouse. The WTIU News Team is committed to helping you stay up to date with the issues that affect your family's future. Keep yourself informed. Tune in to Indiana Newsdesk, your source for regional and state in-depth news.
Ready to watch the best of PBS anytime, anywhere, on nearly any device? It's easy with the PBS Video app. Simply download the PBS Video app on your mobile or streaming device. Now you can watch the latest PBS episodes or catch up on the shows you missed, discover new favorites from PBS, and local content from your PBS station.
Welcome back to Indiana Newsdesk. Midwestern springtime is heralded by the return of birdsong and sunshine, but warmer temperatures also mark new growth cycles for invasive and sometimes stinky plant species. Emma Atkinson reports.
The Bradford pear tree, a cultivar of the Callery pear tree, is easily identifiable by the tightly bunched white flowers it produces in early spring. And if you've ever come within smelling distance of the tree, you've noticed the bloom's strong, sometimes pungent odor. In Bloomington, the Bradford pear is the second most common species in public parks and along streets, according to a 2019 city tree inventory. The town has more than 1,200 Bradford pear trees.
These Callery pear will grow up and outcompete the understory, and then they're a weak tree, so they'll start breaking in bad weather. Once they get to a certain height, maybe about 30 years old, they'll break in half or split down the middle.
The Bradford Pear's ability to grow so quickly is what initially made it an attractive tree to city planners and landscapers in the mid-1900s. By themselves, Callery pear trees are sterile, meaning that they can't self-pollinate and reproduce. But cross-pollination between multiple cultivars over time has produced fertile seeds. Those are spread widely and quickly by hungry birds and easily crowd out native species.
They've been in cold storage and now they're coming out of dormancy, so we're getting them in the ground.
That's Jillian Field, a member of Monroe County Iris. Even as she plants a native sapling, she notices a familiar invasive plant just a few feet away.
You can see just across the way here we have Callery pear, and we have evidence of a sprout coming up over here.
Bloomington's urban forester Aaron Hatch says that's what the Bradford pear does best, shows up where it isn't wanted.
The ability to survive anywhere in really poor soil means that they can spread anywhere that has conditions that they can then outcompete native species as well.
Both the Indiana Department of Natural Resources and the city of Bloomington have been working to educate people about invasive species and encourage them not to plant Bradford pears. The city certainly won't be planting any more. The Bradford pear is on a list of prohibited plant species in Bloomington's Unified Development Ordinance document. Hatch says people have many other options for flowering trees.
The serviceberry, dogwood trees are also a nice flowering alternative, and there are some that are white. The redbud is another flowering alternative. There are alternatives that are more adapted to our native ecosystem.
Hatch says it's important to consider the financial and environmental impact of removing the tree and what might grow in its place.
I probably personally would encourage someone to remove the tree and replace it with something that's better. But taking into account you're removing a maybe 12 to 20 inch tree and replacing with a 2-inch tree, you might need to replace more than just one.
The Bradford pear is not yet on Indiana's list of invasive plant species, but the growing opposition to the tree and awareness of the importance of native plants could change that within just a few years. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Emma Atkinson.
The Bradford pear was first cultivated from the Callery pear trees, which originated in China. And now for headlines, Ethan Burks joins us from the newsroom. Hi, Ethan.
Hi, Joe. Thanks. Indianapolis FedEx employees returned to work a week after a shooting claimed the lives of 8 of its workers. Half the employees killed were members of the Sikh community. An estimated 8,000 to 10,000 Sikhs call Indiana home, but a Sikh civil rights organization is calling on law enforcement to investigate whether the shooter, 19-year-old Brandon Scott Hull, had any ties to hate groups. Hull used to work at the FedEx facility and took his own life during the shooting. Police say Hull's computer history shows he previously browsed white supremacy websites. As the Sikh community continues to remember those who were killed, they are calling on law enforcement to investigate whether hate played a role in the mass shooting.
The loss of life here in Indianapolis is real. It's real in Boulder. It's real in Atlanta and in countless other communities that are part of a nationwide epidemic of gun violence.
Carson and other officials are calling for community solidarity and stricter gun laws to prevent future mass shootings. A heavy metal guitarist from Columbus has become the first defendant to plead guilty to federal charges in connection with the January 6th insurrection at the U.S. Capitol. John Ryan Schaefer has agreed to surrender his firearms, submit to supervision, and abide by a number of travel restrictions. He has agreed to testify and aid investigators in other cases. Showing a video interview of Schaefer from a November rally for former President Donald Trump, federal attorneys argued Schaefer contemplated violence before he engaged in the insurrection.
They're behind divide and conquer tactics, behind the racial divide. It's all nonsense. It's all garbage. People need to wake up and snap out of the matrix because they're going down. They've made the move. They're messing with the wrong people here. Trust me on that.
Schaefer admits to being a lifetime founding member of the militia group the Oath Keepers. He faces up to 30 years in prison. Around 400 people have been charged in connection with the riot at the Capitol. The national headquarters of the Sigma Pi fraternity, along with Indiana University, have agreed to close its Bloomington chapter. The organization has been cited for hazing and violating COVID-19 guidelines. The university says the house closed its facility last semester at the urging of the Monroe County Health Department for hosting multiple parties. Sigma Pi will not be eligible to return to IU until 2023. The Indiana Commission for Higher Education is extending the deadline for filing the federal application for student financial aid, or FAFSA. There's no new deadline for students to submit their applications. Instead, the commission says limited award funding will be issued on a first-come, first-served basis. So in other words, people should file as soon as possible. Officials say the class of 2021's FAFSA filing rate is down by at least 6%. The Bloomington-based Upland Brewing Company is expanding its distribution into Chicago. The brewery already distributes in major cities like Atlanta and Washington, D.C. President of Upland says the brewery gets regular requests from IU alumni to start selling its beer in the Windy City. Upland is partnering with Heartland Beverage, the last independent craft beer distributor in Chicago.
We're really invested in becoming part of Chicago, not just in a transactional way, not just to periodically sell them beer, but to get involved with the community, to develop relationships with the retailers, and to, as I said, further develop this relationship with our wholesaler.
There will be no fans at this year's Indianapolis 500. No fans were allowed at last year's race due to the pandemic. The Speedway will allow approximately 135,000 people to attend the May 30th race, putting the facility at 40% capacity. The greatest spectacle in racing will be the country's most attended sporting event since the pandemic began. The Speedway will be open to spectators every day that cars are on the track, beginning with the May 15th road course event. And that's all for headlines. Back to you, Joe.
All right, Ethan, thank you. Well, a little more than a month from now, members of the class of 2021 will receive their diplomas in person at Indiana University. Last year's in-person graduation was canceled because of COVID-19. However, parents and friends won't be able to attend in person. Adam Pinsker tells us what you need to consider if you plan to travel to Bloomington.
The days are longer and things are looking greener outside, a sure sign it's almost graduation day at Indiana University. Even though only students will be allowed to attend in person because of the COVID-19 pandemic, Visit Bloomington's Mike McAfee hopes that doesn't deter family from traveling to Bloomington for graduation weekend.
There'll still be many parents and people coming into town that weekend to pick up their students or, to celebrate in a safe way, which we encourage. Everything will still be open. We'll still be open for business.
But for those considering canceling their hotel reservations and for those who are trying to make last-minute reservations, there is a lot to consider, including room rates, which skyrocket this time of year.
Commencement weekend is right up there with Big Ten football games. They're the large. I'm quoting, largest revenue producing weekends of the year for the area.
In the spring of 2020, most of the country was on a lockdown at the height of the pandemic. With IU's 2020 graduation canceled, parents and relatives scrambled to cancel their hotel reservations. But many didn't get refunds, including a Long Island woman who told us the Comfort Inn on Kinzer Pike in Bloomington would not refund her deposit after she canceled a reservation. The hotel required her to pay the deposit in cash.
If someone is only taking, cash or check or something like that, boy, that's going to be difficult to get your money back.
Most credit card companies will refund your money over a transaction that is in dispute, but it's important consumers read the fine print in their prospective hotel's cancellation policy, as some hotels don't allow any cancellations for commencement weekend.
Most hotels have kind of standard cancellation policies. In fact, I think Marriott here a couple of years ago changed theirs from 24 hours prior to your arrival to 48 hours prior to your arrival. But for special occasions like this, they may have a different cancellation policy.
The Comfort Inn customer says she was offered a credit for a future stay, but only at the Comfort Inn location in Bloomington. And with her daughter already graduated, she doesn't anticipate returning to Bloomington. Another parent sent us this letter in December saying that he put down $900 in deposit money at the Holiday Inn on Kinzer Pike for the ill-fated 2020 graduation and still hasn't received his refund. The Holiday Inn and Comfort Inn are owned by an out-of-state operator called TriStar Properties. TriStar also owns the Holiday Inn Express on Franklin Road.
It's unfortunate and disappointing to anyone in the tourism industry in the market when that happens.
To avoid high prices and strict cancellation rules, the Better Business Bureau recommends trying hotels in surrounding communities like Martinsville or even Indianapolis, where the rates aren't as high.
Hotel chains track this stuff. They know what's going on. They know the events that are there. They've got computer models that can predict what the demand is going to be.
With this being Bloomington's second graduation go-round under strict COVID-19 precautions, Visit Bloomington is hoping there will not be any problems should customers have to cancel their rooms.
Hotels know going into this year the unusual circumstances. So again, there are most of the hotels are communicating regularly with their guests on that type of stuff.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Adam Pinsker.
And commencement is scheduled for May 8th. That's the end of this program. Our work continues online at WTIUnews.org. Have a great weekend.
Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Maller Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Alumni Association, connecting IU's network of alumni and sharing the Indiana spirit through scholarships, advocacy, and volunteerism. Alumni.iu.edu. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. Rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.